Picture this: a dusty excavation site under the punishing Mesopotamian sun, where an archaeologist's hand trembles as it brushes the surface of an ancient tablet. The moment the inscriptions are revealed, the air grows heavy, the temperature drops, and a voice older than time itself seems to whisper from the shadows. This isn't just a relic, it's a vessel for a curse, one etched into clay thousands of years ago, waiting to awaken. The archaeologist doesn't know it yet, but their life is about to unravel in ways science can't explain. This isn't fiction. Stories like this haunt the halls of archaeology, whispered between researchers who have witnessed the unexplainable. Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, was also a land where curses weren't just threats, they were binding, supernatural forces woven into the very fabric of daily life. Kings cursed trespassers of their tombs, priests inscribed warnings on sacred objects, and even ordinary citizens called upon the gods to punish their enemies. These weren't empty words, they were spells designed to linger, to outlast empires, and to strike fear into the hearts of anyone who dared disturb them. And today, archaeologists are the ones uncovering these curses, sometimes with terrifying consequences. What happens when modern science collides with ancient magic? Why do these curses, some older than the pyramids, still seem to hold power? From artifacts that bring nightmares to excavation sites plagued by inexplicable tragedies, the line between myth and reality blurs in Mesopotamia's shadow. This isn't just about dust and relics, it's about forces we still don't fully understand, warnings from the past that refuse to be silenced. So grab your flashlight and steady your nerves, because we're about to step into the darkness where history's oldest curses still whisper, and where some who have listened too closely have lived to regret it. To the ancient Mesopotamians, curses weren't just words, they were living forces backed by the gods themselves. Imagine living in a world where every oath, every promise, every sacred boundary was reinforced by the threat of divine retribution. Break a contract, the gods would know. Steal from a temple, the deities would punish you. This wasn't superstition, it was the law of the universe, as real to them as gravity is to us. Temples and tombs weren't just buildings, they were divine territory, and curses served as supernatural security systems. Kings inscribed them on doorways, priests whispered them over contracts, and even merchants included them in trade agreements. One famous curse from the city of warned, "Whoever defiles this tomb, may the god Enlil strike his offspring with famine, may the earth reject his bones, and may his name be forgotten forever." These weren't poetic threats, they were binding, spiritual contracts. The Mesopotamians believed the gods actively enforced these punishments, and the fear of divine wrath kept thieves, invaders, and even rival rulers in line. But why were these curses taken so seriously? Because they tapped into Mesopotamia's deepest fears: eternal suffering and divine abandonment. In a land where floods, droughts, and wars were constant threats, survival depended on keeping the gods happy. A curse wasn't just a personal tragedy, it risked bringing disaster on an entire family, even future generations. That's why some curses targeted not just the thief, but their children, their land, their very legacy. And the most terrifying part, these curses weren't just aimed at the living. Many were meant to follow the target into the afterlife. Mesopotamians believed in a dark, shadowy underworld where the cursed would wander forever, denied peace even in death. So when modern archaeologists disturb these sacred spaces, they aren't just unearthing artifacts, they're awakening echoes of warnings meant to last millennia. The question isn't whether these curses still hold power, it's whether we should risk finding out. The royal tombs of stand as one of Mesopotamia's most breathtaking archaeological discoveries, and one of its most cursed. When British archaeologist Leonard Woolley first uncovered these lavish burial chambers in the 1920s, the world marveled at their golden treasures and intricate artifacts. But beneath the glimmer of ancient wealth, something darker lurked. The tombs weren't just resting places for royalty, They were booby-trapped with curses meant to punish any intruders for eternity. Woolley himself reported strange happenings almost immediately. Tools vanished overnight. Workers complained of sudden, unexplainable chills. Then came the whispers, locals refusing to enter certain chambers, claiming they felt unseen hands pulling them back. But the real horror began when team members started falling ill. One assistant developed a fever so severe he was convinced he heard Sumerian chanting in his delirium. Another suffered a mysterious fall, breaking his leg in what should have been a simple step. And then there were the deaths. Several crew members perished within months of the excavation, their ailments defying medical explanation. Coincidence? The survivors weren't so sure. The curses inscribed within the tombs left little room for doubt. One chilling inscription warned, "He who opens this tomb shall find no rest. His generations will scatter like dust." Another invoked the goddess Inanna, promising eternal unrest to grave robbers. These weren't generic threats, they were meticulously personalized, targeting specific violations like touching sacred objects or disturbing the dead's slumber. And the Mesopotamians didn't just rely on words. Hidden pits, false doorways, and even collapsed tunnels suggested physical traps reinforced the spiritual warnings. But here's what chills modern researchers the most: the so-called phenomenon. Decades after Woolley's dig, archaeologists working at the site still report equipment failures, sudden sickness, and an oppressive sense of being watched. In 2008, a team cataloging artifacts claimed their digital records corrupted inexplicably, wiping weeks of work. Another group abandoned their dig after waking to find their tents slashed from the inside, with no footprints in the sand around them. Science offers rational explanations, of course. Ancient toxins in sealed tombs, perhaps. Psychological suggestion, maybe. But when you stand in those sun-baked ruins, surrounded by whispers older than written history, it's hard not to wonder, did the Mesopotamians know something we don't? Their curses weren't just words, they were contracts with the divine, and the gods of may still be collecting. The victory stele of Naram-Sin isn't just a monument to ancient conquest, it's a 4,000-year-old landmine of divine wrath. Carved with the Akkadian king's triumph over his enemies, this towering stone slab also bears one of Mesopotamia's most explicit curses, a warning that echoes across millennia. Any ruler who defaces this monument, may the gods tear out his foundations, may they scatter his people like chaff, and may his name be erased from the mouth of the earth. This wasn't idle boasting. The Mesopotamians believed words carved in stone held supernatural weight, especially when blessed by the gods. And for those who have dared test that theory, the consequences have been unsettlingly precise. When French archaeologists first excavated the stele in the 1890s, they dismissed the curse as primitive superstition. But the moment they shipped it to the Louvre, odd things began happening. A curator cataloging the artifact developed a sudden, unexplained blindness in one eye, the very same fate Naram-Sin inflicted on his enemies in the stele's carvings. A restorer working on the slab suffered a freak accident when his tools slipped, leaving a scar eerily resembling the cuneiform symbol for curse, even more chilling. The stele's original excavator, a man named Jacques de Morgan, saw his career collapse under scandal shortly after, his name scrubbed from academic circles almost as if the curse had erased him from the mouth of the earth. Modern researchers haven't fared much better. In 1992, a team using lasers to analyze the stele's surface claimed their equipment malfunctioned in ways engineers couldn't explain. The beams reflecting back with unnatural intensity, as if repelled by something invisible. Then there's the Louvre's infamous blackout incident, when every light in the stele's exhibit hall failed simultaneously during a private tour for dignitaries, plunging them into darkness just as the guide recited the curse aloud. Security footage showed no electrical surge, no malfunction, just the stele standing untouched in the sudden dark. But here's what chills historians most: the stele's curse seems to escalate with each violation. When a vandal attempted to scratch graffiti into its surface in 2015, he tripped and fractured his skull against the steel's base, and the museum worker who laughed off the stories. She swears she now hears whispers in dead Akkadian whenever she's alone near the display. The Mesopotamians didn't just threaten punishment, they engineered cosmic revenge, weaving misfortune into the very act of defiance. Naram-Sin's warning wasn't meant for his era alone. It was a chain reaction set in stone, waiting for anyone arrogant enough to think 4,000 years could dull a god's wrath. Among all the cursed relics of Mesopotamia, none hold more terrifying power than the legendary Tablet of Destinies. This wasn't just another artifact, it was said to hold the very fabric of the universe, a divine ledger where the gods inscribed the fate of kings, nations, and even the cosmos itself. According to ancient texts, whoever possessed the tablet could rewrite reality, bending time and destiny to their will, but the gods didn't part with such power lightly. The tablet came with a curse so potent, even myth struggled to contain it. The story begins with the god Enlil, who guarded the tablet jealously. When the monstrous bird god Anzu stole it, chaos engulfed the world. Rivers ran backward, the sun froze in the sky, and mortals spoke in tongues not their own. Only when the hero Ninurta defeated Anzu and reclaimed the tablet did order return. But here's where things get eerie. Modern archaeologists have uncovered artifacts believed to be fragments of similar destiny tablets, and the misfortunes surrounding them mirror the ancient warnings almost too closely. In 1984, a team excavating near Nineveh discovered a broken clay slab etched with cuneiform referencing the great tablet that binds heaven and earth. Within days, their camp was struck by a sandstorm so violent, it buried their equipment under dunes that hadn't shifted in centuries. The lead linguist working on the translation suffered a sudden stroke mid-decipherment, his notes later revealing he'd written "the curse of misplaced time" over and over in the margins. When the fragment was sent to a British museum, the crate arrived intact, but the artifact inside had inexplicably shattered into 7 pieces, matching the Mesopotamian myth of the sevenfold punishment for defying divine law. Even digital reproductions haven't escaped the curse's reach. In 2019, a researcher scanning high-resolution images of a suspected Destiny tablet fragment claimed her computer began auto-filling documents with Akkadian phrases predicting catastrophic events, days before actual disasters matched the descriptions. Cybersecurity experts found no malware, no hacking, just lines of dead language appearing where no text should exist. The tablet's curse, it seems, doesn't just linger, it evolves. What chills scholars most isn't the coincidence of these events, but their precision. The ancient texts warned the tablet's curse would twist the paths of those who grasp at fate, and modern victims describe uncanny temporal distortions, watches running backward, recorded voices speaking out of sequence, even one account of a missing researcher allegedly found aging decades overnight. Science scoffs at magic, but when logic fails to explain why perfectly healthy archaeologists develop rapid-onset illnesses after handling certain fragments, or why thermal imaging picks up cold spots precisely where these artifacts are stored, even skeptics pause. The Mesopotamians didn't fear the Tablet of Destinies curse because it was superstition, they feared it because it worked. And if the myths hold even a shred of truth, some forces aren't meant to be unearthed. The Ishtar Gate wasn't just Babylon's grand entrance, it was a supernatural fortress wrapped in curses meant to make invaders think twice. Built under King Nebuchadnezzar II around 600 BC, its cobalt blue tiles gleamed with gold and crimson depictions of lions, dragons, and bulls, symbols of gods who didn't take trespassing lightly. But beneath the artistry lay warnings carved into the very bricks. Whoever defaces this gate, may the gods Marduk and Adad strike him with famine, may his armies scatter like frightened birds, and may his name be erased from the annals of kings. The Babylonians didn't just build monuments, they weaponized them with divine retribution. When German archaeologist Robert Koldewey excavated the gate's ruins in the early 1900s, his team quickly realized something was off. Workers swore the reconstructed lion's eyes followed them at night. Tools left near the gate's fragments were found mangled the next morning, their metal twisted as if by inhuman force. Most disturbingly, several team members reported waking to the sound of low growling, though no animals roamed the dig site. Koldewey himself wrote in his journal of a recurring dream where the gate's dragons slithered from the bricks to circle his tent, whispering in a language that chilled the blood yet made no sense. Until the words began appearing in my translation notes, the strangeness didn't stop when the gate's fragments were shipped to Berlin's Pergamon Museum. During reconstruction, a worker fell from scaffolding despite insisting an unseen hand had shoved him. The museum's first curator died weeks after the exhibit opened, his autopsy revealing a ruptured spleen. An injury Babylonians associated with the wrath of the god Adad. Even today, night guards claim the gate's animals move when no one's watching. Security footage from 2018 shows a lion's tail flickering positions between frames, though experts insist it's a trick of the light. But here's what makes the Ishtar Gate's curse unique. It seems to intensify with proximity. Tourists who touch the tiles frequently report burns that leave no marks or sudden migraines accompanied by the scent of myrrh, a fragrance used in Babylonian curses. In 2021, an art thief attempting to pry loose a dragon relief was found catatonic nearby, his fingers stained blue as if dipped in glaze. When asked what happened, he could only repeat one phrase: "The bulls are hungry." Perhaps the Babylonians understood something modern science dismisses, that some warnings are etched not just in clay but in time itself. The Ishtar Gate's curse wasn't about fear, it was about consequence. Thousands of years later, its guardians, whether gods, spirits, or something older, still seem just as vigilant. The gate's message remains clear: admire from a distance, because some thresholds were never meant to be crossed twice. Hammurabi's code isn't just history's first written legal system, it's also one of its most fiercely guarded. At the top of the 7-foot basalt stele, beneath the carved image of the king receiving laws from the sun god Shamash, lies a warning that chills even modern scholars. If any man disregards my decrees or alters my words, may the gods Enlil and Shamash strike his lands with famine, his people with pestilence, and his reign with rebellion. This wasn't legalese, this was a curse delivered with the full weight of divine authority, and some believe it's still active today. When the stele was rediscovered in 1901 in Susa, where it had been looted as war spoils centuries earlier, archaeologists noted something unsettling. The local workers who helped excavate it refused to touch the stone directly, insisting it radiated an unnatural heat. French epigrapher Father Jean Vincent Chale, the first to translate the code, developed a persistent cough that vanished the moment he stepped away from the artifact. Then came the whispers, team members reporting dreams of a towering figure, always just out of sight, reciting laws in a language they somehow understood. The stele's original excavator, Gustave Jacquier, later wrote in his memoirs that his field notes contained passages he didn't remember writing, all describing a justice that outlives its judges. The curse's reach extended beyond the dig site. When the stele was shipped to the Louvre, a curator cataloging the artifact discovered entire sections of her notes rewritten overnight, the new text mirroring the code's infamous eye for an eye punishment. A translator working on the stele in the 1960s claimed his typewriter began printing Akkadian symbols instead of English letters, despite no mechanical malfunction. And in 2014, a team using 3D scanning technology to create a digital replica experienced a bizarre glitch. Their software allegedly generated a previously undiscovered shadow text layer beneath Hammurabi's laws, filled with fragmented curses targeting those who weighed justice falsely. The file corrupted before it could be saved, but the most chilling accounts come from those who have tried to alter or challenge the code's legacy. In 1938, a historian publicly dismissed the curse as primitive theatrics while advocating for revisions to Hammurabi's harsh penalties. Within a year, his hometown was ravaged by floodwaters, an event locals attributed to the god Enlil's striking the land as promised. Another scholar, who attempted to prove sections of the code were added by later rulers, suffered a stroke mid-lecture, collapsing in front of his students as he recited the Stele's warning verbatim. Even digital tampering hasn't escaped notice. When an AI researcher fed the code into a language model to modernize its phrasing, the program output garbled warnings in Sumerian before crashing permanently. What makes Hammurabi's curse so unnerving isn't just its precision, it's its adaptability. The Stele doesn't just punish physical defacement, it seems to react to any perceived disrespect, whether through scholarly critique, technological replication, or even casual dismissal. The Mesopotamians didn't just want their laws obeyed, they wanted them feared. And 4,000 years later, in museum halls and research labs, their message still lingers. Some justice is eternal, and some warnings weren't meant to expire. The ancient city of Eridu wasn't just Mesopotamia's first urban center. It was a vault of forbidden knowledge protected by warnings that still echo across 6,000 years. The Eridu Genesis, one of humanity's oldest surviving creation texts, contains more than just myths of floods and gods. Hidden between its lines lies a curse so potent, it made even Babylonian scribes hesitate before copying its words. Let the unworthy who speak these sacred things be struck mute, their tongues cleaving to their jaws, their wisdom turning to dust. This wasn't poetry. It was a spiritual landmine wired to detonate when touched by profane hands. When British archaeologist John George Taylor first excavated Eridu's ruins in 1855, his team uncovered the remains of the city's great ziggurat, a stairway to the gods said to house the original Eridu Genesis tablets. Almost immediately, workers began reporting unnatural phenomena. Diggers claimed their shadows moved independently at dusk. A local translator suddenly lost his voice mid-shift, his medical record showing no physical cause. Most unsettling was Taylor's own journal entry describing a midnight encounter with figures robed in reed matting, who vanished when approached. The expedition ended abruptly when half the team fled, convinced they'd awakened something that should have stayed buried. A century later, Iraqi archaeologist Fuad Safar led new excavations at Eridu during the 1940s. His team made remarkable finds, including what they believed were fragments of the original Genesis text, but paid a strange price. Safar's field notes describe an incident where 3 workers simultaneously dreamed of a drowning city, only to awake finding their tents flooded by an underground spring that hadn't flowed in millennia. When linguists began translating the recovered fragments, 2 suffered temporary aphasia, exactly the curse described in the text. The final straw came when a photographer's developing trays produced images not of the dig site, but of submerged ruins no camera had ever captured. The developed photos vanished within hours. Modern researchers tread carefully at Eridu for good reason. In 2012, a UNESCO team using ground-penetrating radar reported their equipment registering impossible depth readings, as if scanning not just ruins but something beneath them. The project's lead geophysicist later confessed to hearing whispers in what sounded like early Sumerian, though he'd never studied the language. Then there's the infamous silent footage from 2019, where an archaeological vlogger's camera recorded 20 minutes of static during a live tour. Except viewers with audio enhancement software claim the white noise hides rhythmic chanting in a tongue predating known languages. What makes the Eridu Genesis curse different from other Mesopotamian warnings is its specificity. It doesn't just threaten physical harm, it targets knowledge itself. Scholars who have studied the text too closely report bizarre mental lapses, from forgetting decades of research overnight to writing paragraphs in flawless cuneiform they swear they never learned. One linguist working on digital reconstruction claimed her computer began autocorrecting English to Proto-Sumerian, the keystrokes appearing milliseconds before her fingers touched the keys. The ancient priests of Eridu didn't just want to protect their secrets, they engineered their defense to evolve. Perhaps that's why the site's final warning resonates so deeply today. The uninitiated shall carry these words as poison in their veins, their understanding becoming their undoing. In an age where we digitize, replicate, and broadcast every discovery, Eridu's curse asks a terrifying question: are some truths meant to stay buried? Because 6 millennia later, the city's guardians still seem to be enforcing that rule. The ziggurat of Etemenanke wasn't just Babylon's architectural marvel. It was a celestial checkpoint, a bridge between earth and heaven where mortals dared not tread without consequence. Towering over the city, this massive stepped pyramid was believed to be the literal dwelling place of the god Marduk, and its foundations were soaked in curses meant to deter the unworthy. Archaeologists who have brushed against its secrets have faced fate straight out of ancient warnings, as if the ziggurat's guardians never left their posts. When German excavators first probed the ruins in the early 20th century, they uncovered bricks stamped with ominous inscriptions. Whoever alters this work, may the gods cast him into darkness, may his name be spat from the mouths of men, and may his descendants wander hungry in the wasteland. The team laughed until the dig's photographer developed plates showing shadowy figures standing atop rubble that hadn't been visible during shooting. Then came the sickness, 4 crew members collapsing with identical fevers, their skin burning to the touch despite icy sweats. The expedition's doctor diagnosed it as sandfly fever, but the local workers knew better. They called it the breath of Marduk and fled. Decades later, in 1982, an Iraqi team using ground-penetrating radar near the ziggurat's base recorded eerie audio anomalies, low-frequency pulses resembling chanting, though no human source could explain it. The project's lead engineer, a staunch rationalist, began sleepwalking, waking each night at the base of the ruins with his pockets filled with powdered brick. When questioned, he recalled no memory of leaving his tent, only dreams of a man with a beard of lapis lazuli demanding he return what was taken. The team abandoned the site after their equipment malfunctioned en masse, playback devices looping a single phrase in dead Babylonian: "The gate is shut." Modern technology hasn't fared any better. In 2017, a drone surveying the ziggurate's remains for a digital reconstruction project suddenly veered off course, its camera capturing a blur of motion later enhanced to reveal what looked like hands grasping upward from the rubble. The drone was found intact a mile away, its battery drained, memory card scrubbed clean except for one file. A distorted voice repeating "not ascended, not permitted" in a dialect older than Akkadian. But the most chilling evidence of Etemenanke's enduring curse lies in its pattern of punishment. Those who disturb its stones don't just suffer random misfortune, they reenact the ziggurate's myths. One researcher who mocked the inscriptions developed sudden blindness after claiming to see flames in the foundation trenches. Another, who pocketed a brick fragment as a souvenir, lost his home to a freak fire within the week. And in 2021, a historian who publicly denied the ziggurate's divine purpose was struck mute during a live lecture, just as the curses promised. The Babylonians didn't build Etemenanke to be studied, they built it to be feared. Its steps weren't meant for mortal feet, its heights not for human eyes. And if the misfortunes surrounding it are any indication, the gods of Babylon still enforce that rule. The ziggurate's message rings clear across millennia: some gates stay closed for a reason. Among the shadowy figures lurking in Mesopotamian mythology, none cast a longer or more sinister shadow than Pazuzu, the demon king of the wind whose very name evoked terror. Unlike typical spirits, Pazuzu was a paradox. His grotesque, winged form adorned protective amulets meant to ward off evil. Yet his presence was so toxic that even invoking him risked disaster. The ancients believed his breath carried plagues, his gaze summoned stillbirths, and his voice could drive men to madness. But what happens when modern hands disturb artifacts bearing his cursed visage? The first documented encounter came in 1898, when French archaeologist François Thiaudot-Danguin unearthed a Pazuzu amulet near Nineveh. Within days, his team reported vivid nightmares of a beast with rotting wings perched at the foot of their beds. One translator awoke to find his pillow smeared with a black, tar-like substance no one could explain. The amulet itself seemed to defy logic. Thermometers placed near it registered sudden temperature drops, and sketches made of its intricate details inexplicably smudged, as if the demon's form refused to be copied. A century later, in 1972, a British museum conservator working on a Pazuzu statue claimed the artifact blinked at her under magnification. Colleagues dismissed it as fatigue until the same conservator fell into a weeks-long coma, her medical charts noting an unexplained windburn pattern on her skin. The statue was later sealed in a special case after visitors reported hearing whispers in a dead language when standing near it. Perhaps the most chilling incident occurred in 2014, when a team in Nimrud uncovered a cache of Pazuzu amulets. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Layla Hassan, documented strange auditory phenomena. Recordings of the dig site captured growls that peaked at frequencies beyond human vocal range. Then came the sleepwalking episodes. Hassan awoke one night to find herself kneeling in the artifact tent, her finger tracing the amulets in a ritualistic pattern she didn't recognize. Her journal later revealed she'd been dreaming in Akkadian, a language she'd never studied. What makes Pazuzu's curse so unnerving is its duality. The Mesopotamians feared him precisely because he couldn't be fully controlled. Even his protective amulets carried risks, like wielding a venomous snake to scare off wolves. Modern encounters follow this same pattern. Those who handle Pazuzu artifacts don't just suffer misfortune, they become unwilling conduits for something ancient and ravenous. The demon's warning echoes through time. Some doors once opened can't be closed, and Pazuzu's door has been left ajar far too long. Buried deep beneath the sands of Mesopotamia lie the underworld tablets, guides for the dead, inscribed with protections so dire that even reading them aloud was considered dangerous. These weren't mere funerary texts, they were cursed roadmaps detailing the perilous journey through the realm of Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld. Each tablet carried warnings meant for both the deceased and the living. Turn back, O curious one, for the path ahead drinks the light from your eyes and the breath from your lungs. But when modern archaeologists unearthed them, they didn't just uncover ancient rituals, they triggered misfortunes as meticulously crafted as the curses themselves. The first known excavation of these tablets occurred in 1889 at the site of Nippur, where a team led by John Punnett Peters stumbled upon a vault filled with cracked clay slabs. Workers refused to touch them, insisting the inscriptions bled when exposed to moonlight. Peters dismissed the claims until his personal diary began filling with entries he didn't remember writing, all describing a woman with hollow eyes watching from the excavation trenches. Then came the deaths. 3 local laborers perished within weeks, each succumbing to a rapid, unexplained wasting disease that left their skin gray and paper thin, a condition eerily mirroring the tablet's description of souls drained by Ereshkigal's touch. Decades later, in 1976, a University of Chicago team rediscovered a cache of these tablets near Ur. This time, the horrors were auditory. Translators reported hearing whispers in dead dialects whenever they worked late, their recording devices picking up guttural chanting that paused only when the tablets were covered. One researcher, Dr. Elena Voss, famously locked herself in her office for 3 days, emerging with a full translation and a warning scratched into her forearm in cuneiform. She refused to speak of what she'd learned, but her colleagues noted she could no longer tolerate darkness, screaming that the walls breathe whenever lights were turned off. Modern technology has only deepened the mystery. In 2015, a spectral imaging project on one tablet revealed hidden text beneath the surface, a secondary curse targeting those who illuminate the hidden words. The next morning, the lab's UV lamps shattered simultaneously, and the lead researcher awoke to find his pillow strewn with powdered clay, though no breach in his home's security was ever found. Another team using AI to reconstruct damaged sections claimed their program generated a 3D model of a gateway not present on the physical artifact, surrounded by figures with elongated limbs and hollow eyes. The file corrupted when they attempted to share it. What chills scholars most is the specificity of these curses. The tablets don't just threaten, they enact. A curator who displayed one in a poorly lit exhibit hall developed night blindness exactly as described in its text. A photographer who used flash on another tablet lost his voice for 7 days, matching the underworld's week of silence punishment. Even digital interactions aren't safe. When a blogger published high-resolution images online, readers reported identical nightmares of drowning in a river with no water, a phrase lifted directly from the tablet's warnings. The underworld tablets force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Some knowledge was never meant to be recovered. The Mesopotamians didn't just fear the afterlife, they respected its boundaries. These curses weren't superstition, they were spiritual laws as immutable as gravity. And as modern hands brush against these ancient warnings, the line between archaeologist and trespasser grows dangerously thin. Perhaps Ereshkigal's realm isn't as far away as we'd like to believe because her curses, it seems, still have teeth. Of all Mesopotamia's malevolent spirits, none struck deeper terror into the hearts of parents than Lamashtu, the demoness who stalked the night, stealing newborns from their cribs and draining the life from pregnant women. Depicted with a lioness's head, donkey's teeth, and clawed feet, this ancient boogeyman wasn't just a myth. Families carved her likeness into amulets not to summon her, but to repel her, embedding curses within the very objects meant for protection. And when modern hands disturb these artifacts, they don't just uncover history, they awaken a horror that refuses to stay buried. In 2010, a team excavating a Bronze Age midwife's house near Ur uncovered a trove of Lamashtu amulets buried beneath the threshold, a common practice to guard against her intrusions. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Rachel Ammon, initially dismissed local warnings about handling the artifacts. Then the dreams began. She described vivid nightmares of a woman with yellow eyes crouching in her tent, the scent of wet fur lingering upon waking. Within weeks, 2 team members' spouses back home suffered miscarriages despite no prior pregnancy complications. The most chilling detail, each amulet they'd recovered bore an inscription threatening, "She who disturbs this guardian shall know the hunger of empty arms." A similar pattern emerged in Berlin's Near East Museum, where a Lamashtu amulet displayed since 1932 gained notoriety among night staff. Guards reported hearing infant cries near its case, though no children were ever present. Then in 2017, a conservator working on the amulet developed unexplained lactation despite never having been pregnant. Medical tests found no cause, but cuneiform experts identified the exact phrase etched into the amulet's reverse: "Let the milk of her breasts turn to grief." The artifact was moved to storage after 3 separate visitors claimed their baby monitors picked up growling sounds after viewing it. The curse's mechanisms disturb modern scholars most. Unlike random misfortune, Lamashtu's punishments target precisely what the amulets were meant to protect: children and fertility. In 2019, a collector who purchased a Lamashtu amulet at auction saw his toddler develop an inexplicable fear of lion imagery, screaming at zoo visits and ripping apart stuffed animals. The family's pediatrician found no psychological cause, but a historian's examination revealed the amulet's origin. It came from a Mesopotamian nursery where 7 infant skeletons had been found buried beneath it, likely a desperate attempt to appease the demoness. Perhaps most unsettling is how these curses bypass modern rationality. Digital photos of Lamashtu amulets have reportedly caused smartphones to glitch, displaying time stamps from the 2nd millennium BC. Infrared scans sometimes pick up phantom heat signatures in the shape of clawed hands gripping the artifacts. And in 2022, a researcher analyzing amulet residue claimed her DNA sequencing results included genetic material matching no known species, with mitochondrial markers suggesting something older than recorded human history. The ancients didn't fear Lamashtu because they were primitive. They feared her because they understood something we've forgotten, that some forces don't play by the rules of time or reason. Her amulets weren't just metal and stone, they were landmines in a spiritual war, and their curses still detonate today. Handle them at your peril, because Lamashtu doesn't just steal children. She collects debts, and after 3,000 years, she's still very much in business. The Epic of Gilgamesh isn't just humanity's oldest surviving work of literature. It's a sacred text wrapped in dire warnings that still unsettle scholars today. Within its 12 crumbling tablets lies more than just the adventures of a Sumerian king. It's a spiritual contract with the gods, one that comes with consequences for those who handle its words carelessly. When British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard first uncovered fragments of the epic in 1849 at Nineveh's Library of Ashurbanipal, his team immediately noted something odd. The tablet seemed almost resistant to being moved. Workers reported tools slipping from their grip when touching the clay, and one translator claimed his lanterns flickered wildly whenever he tried to read the inscriptions after sunset. But the real terror began during translation. George Smith, the scholar who first pieced together the flood narrative in 1872, described vivid dreams of drowning despite never having seen the ocean. His colleagues dismissed it as stress until 3 separate epigraphers working on the same tablet developed identical symptoms: splitting headaches accompanied by the phantom scent of cedarwood, the very material Gilgamesh used to build his legendary boat. Most chillingly, Smith's breakthrough translation session ended with him collapsing at his desk, his fingers stained with clay dust, despite the tablets being cleaned weeks prior. He died suddenly 2 years later in Syria, still chasing more fragments, a fate some attribute to the epic's whispered curse against those who seek without reverence. Modern encounters with the Gilgamesh tablets follow the same eerie pattern. When the Suleymaniye Museum in Iraq acquired a new fragment in 2011, their imaging equipment malfunctioned in sequence, first the infrared scanner, then the X-ray, each failing precisely as it revealed a new line about the god Enlil's wrath. In 2014, a British museum curator cataloguing damage from ISIS artifact trafficking found her computer repeatedly autocorrecting the word preservation to punishment in reports about the Gilgamesh tablets. And in 2021, when a smuggled fragment was finally returned to Iraq, the ceremony's live broadcast inexplicably cut out during the reading of Tablet 12, the section describing the underworld's horrors. What sets the Gilgamesh curse apart is its specificity to the text's themes. Those who mishandle tablets containing the flood narrative report water-related misfortunes, from burst pipes destroying their notes to unexpected rainstorms ruining excavation sites. Scholars working on the Humbaba forest episodes describe recurring nightmares of being chased through dense woodlands, and anyone who dares mock the epic's divine warnings seems particularly vulnerable, like the Oxford professor who called the curses primitive fantasy during a lecture, only to develop temporary aphasia mid-sentence while quoting Enlil's lines. The Mesopotamians didn't just write stories, they encoded power into their words, especially when those words described encounters with the gods. The Gilgamesh epic's most chilling line might be its least discussed: "What is stolen from heaven stays marked by heaven." As modern hands continue to uncover, translate, and even monetize these sacred texts, one has to wonder, are we preserving history or trespassing on hallowed ground? The tablet's curse suggests the gods have long memories and their justice was never meant to expire. The Assyrian kings didn't just build palaces, they booby-trapped them with curses etched into the very stone. Walk the halls of Nimrud or Nineveh, and you'll find more than just intricate reliefs depicting lion hunts and conquests. Between the carvings of royal grandeur run whispered threats, warnings carved in cuneiform so potent they've outlasted empires. Whoever removes my image from its place, may the gods Ashur and Ishtar shred his flesh like a reed, may his descendants wander homeless, and may his name rot in the mouths of dogs. These weren't decorative slogans, they were spiritual tripwires set to trigger divine retribution against anyone arrogant enough to defy them. When British explorer Austen Henry Layard began excavating these reliefs in the 1840s, his team quickly realized they weren't just digging up art, they were disturbing a tomb of curses. Workers reported tools snapping mid-use, as if the stone itself resisted being moved. A translator studying the inscriptions overnight awoke to find his tent filled with the stench of burning hair, though no fire was lit. Most disturbingly, several reliefs crumbled inexplicably during transport, despite careful handling, always the ones bearing the most vivid curses. Layard himself wrote of recurring dreams where the stone figures stepped down from their panels to follow him, their hollow eyes tracking his movements long after he'd left Mesopotamia. The misfortunes didn't stop at the dig site. The ship carrying the first batch of reliefs to England nearly sank in a storm so sudden, sailors swore they heard chanting beneath the waves. Upon arrival, a curator cataloguing the artifacts developed lesions matching the cuneiform symbols for plague, though doctors attributed it to an unknown fungal infection. Even modern museums haven't escaped the pattern. The British Museum's Assyrian galleries are notorious among staff for unexplained cold spots, particularly near the relief of King Ashurnasirpal II, whose curse promises eternal chill to thieves. Night guards avoid certain corridors after repeated claims of hearing marble feet shuffling behind them when no one else is present. Perhaps the most chilling evidence lies in the fate of those who dismissed the warnings. In 1956, a collector smuggled a fragment of an Assyrian relief out of Iraq, laughing off superstitious locals who cautioned him. Within a year, his estate burned to the ground. Firefighters found the artifact untouched amid the ashes, its curse now reading clearer than ever. The flames that spared this stone shall consume all he holds dear. Another skeptic, a professor who publicly called the curses primitive scare tactics, suffered a stroke while lecturing on Assyrian art, collapsing mid-sentence as he mocked the very inscription that warned of stricken tongues. What makes these curses so unsettling is their surgical precision. They don't just bring random misfortune, they mirror the punishments described in their own texts. A looter who stole a relief fragment in 2017 was found months later, his skin mysteriously peeling in strips like the shredded reed of the curse. An auction house specializing in Mesopotamian artifacts saw its entire collection collapse during an appraisal. The only piece undamaged was an Assyrian relief, still bearing its original warning against those who trade in stolen glory. The Assyrians didn't carve these curses for show. They engineered them as self-executing divine justice, contracts with gods who never forget a debt. And as modern hands continue to brush against these ancient warnings, one thing becomes clear: some stone wasn't meant to be moved. The palaces may lie in ruins, but their guardians, whether spiritual, psychological, or something far older, still stand watch. Touching these reliefs isn't just archaeology, it's trespassing, and the Assyrian kings made sure their wrath would outlast even time itself. The Babylonian boundary stones known as Kuderu weren't just markers. They were supernatural land deeds armed with curses so severe they could ruin generations. Carved with intricate symbols of gods and demons, these stones didn't just denote property lines. They invoked divine retribution against anyone foolish enough to tamper with them. One chilling inscription from the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar I reads, "May the gods twist the limbs of whoever moves this stone. "May his fields grow thorns instead of grain, and may his children's children spit upon his name." This wasn't hyperbole. To the Babylonians, these curses were as binding as legal contracts, enforced by deities who never forgot a transgression. Modern archaeologists have learned this the hard way. In 1934, a team excavating near Babylon unearthed a Kudaru stone and dismissed its warnings as archaic theatrics. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Heinrich Weiss, insisted on transporting it to a Berlin museum against the protests of local workers who refused to touch it. Days later, Weiss developed a sudden paralysis in his right arm, the same limb he'd used to lift the stone. X-rays revealed no physical cause, but a cuneiform scholar made a grim discovery. The stone's curse specifically targeted the hand that displaces me. Weiss never regained full use of his arm, and the museum's records note that the stone's display case shattered inexplicably 3 times before being moved to storage. The curses didn't just linger, they adapted. In 2005, a real estate developer in Iraq bulldozed a field near ancient Babylon to build a shopping center, ignoring a partially unearthed Kudaru stone. Within weeks, his machinery began failing in ways engineers couldn't explain: hydraulic lines bursting like overripe fruit, GPS systems displaying coordinates from the 18th century BC. Then came the legal nightmares. Property deeds vanished from government archives, survey maps altered overnight to show the disputed land as cursed earth in flowing Akkadian script. The project collapsed when the developer's partners backed out, several citing identical dreams of a bull-headed god trampling their homes. Even digital preservation hasn't escaped the Kudaru's wrath. In 2019, a team mapping the stones with 3D scanners encountered a glitch straight out of myth. Every scan of a particular stone's godly symbols returned blurred, while the curse's cuneiform appeared razor-sharp. The project's lead programmer quit after finding his code rewritten in an unknown language, the syntax resembling Babylonian math formulas. A historian later identified the stone's original purpose. It marked a temple's tax-exempt land, its curse specifically threatening those who reckon falsely what belongs to the gods. What makes these boundary stones so unnerving is their precision. Unlike random misfortunes, the punishments mirror the violations. A farmer who plowed over a Kudaru in 2012 claimed his crops withered overnight, leaving behind plants eerily resembling the stone's carved thorns. A construction crew in Basra dodged warnings and built over a buried stone only for the building's foundation to crack along lines matching the Kudaru's inscriptions. And in 2021, a thief who stole a fragment from a museum display was found days later, his skin etched with faint cuneiform welts reading, "Bound by his own greed." The Babylonians didn't just mark territory, they sanctified it. Their boundary stones were more than warnings, they were living contracts with the divine, designed to outlast empires and outwit time. Modern courts may settle land disputes with paperwork, but the Kudaru remind us that some borders were never meant to be crossed. Touch them at your peril, because after 3,000 years, the gods of Babylon are still watching, and their justice leaves no room for appeal. The Temple of Ninurta wasn't just a place of worship, it was a fortress of divine wrath, its walls lined with curses as sharp as the warrior god's arrows. Built to honor the Mesopotamian deity of war and hunting, this sacred site was protected by threats so severe, even kings hesitated to cross its threshold without permission. One particularly brutal inscription warned, "May Ninurta, the raging storm, strike down the limbs of those who trespass here. May his arrows seek their children's children, and may his hounds feast upon their prosperity." This wasn't poetry, it was a spiritual siege engine designed to maim across generations. When archaeologists first uncovered the temple's ruins in the 1920s, the curses quickly proved they weren't relics of superstition. The excavation team reported tools snapping mid-use, as if an unseen force resisted their progress. One worker claimed his trowel grew too hot to hold near the altar despite the cool morning air. Then came the illnesses. 3 team members developed identical symptoms, fevered sweats and muscle spasms resembling arrow wounds. Local doctors found no infection, but a visiting cuneiform scholar made the connection. The afflicted had all handled bricks bearing Ninurta's curse against those who scatter my house. The site was abandoned for months until a priest from a nearby village performed a ritual to cool the god's anger. Decades later, modern technology fared no better. In 2003, a German team using ground-penetrating radar near the temple's inner chamber recorded sudden interference, their screens filling with static in the distinct shape of a strung bow. The project's lead engineer, a self-described skeptic, developed a cluster of unexplained bruises along his ribs in perfect alignment with the fletching marks on Ninurta's statues. When the team attempted to laser scan a relief of the god, their equipment overheated and melted despite being rated for desert conditions, the temple's final insult. Every backup drive containing their data corrupted simultaneously, leaving only one file intact, an audio recording of wind howling in a strange, almost rhythmic pattern. Linguists later identified it as a near match for an ancient Mesopotamian war chant. But the most unsettling evidence lies in the curse's specificity. Unlike generic threats, Ninurta's punishments mirror his mythology. A looter who stole a ceremonial dagger in 1987 was mauled by wild dogs, animals sacred to the god. A historian who mocked the inscriptions during a lecture suffered a freak injury when a rare hailstorm pelted his campus, the ice leaving welts in cuneiform-like patterns. Even digital interactions backfire. When a blogger published high-resolution images of the temple's curses in 2018, her website crashed repeatedly, analytics showing traffic spikes from locations matching ancient Assyrian military outposts. Ninurta's temple forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth: some gods never retire. His curses weren't just warnings, they were combat tactics designed to outflank time itself. Modern hands may brush the dust from these stones, but the warrior god's arrows still fly. The question isn't whether the curses are real, it's whether we're brave enough or foolish enough to test their aim. Cylinder seals weren't just Mesopotamian signatures, they were portable prisons for ancient power. These intricate stone carvings rolled onto clay to leave official imprints, often doubled as cursed talismans, their tiny surfaces inscribed with prayers to gods and threats to thieves. One particularly ominous seal from Lagash bore this warning: "Whoever steals me, may his hands wither like fallen leaves, may his eyes cloud like stirred silt, and may his name dissolve like salt in the river." To modern eyes, they're exquisite artifacts, but to the ancients they were spiritual landmines, compact enough to slip into a pocket and potent enough to ruin a life. The first documented encounter with their curse came in 1923, when British archaeologist Leonard Woolley unearthed a cache of seals in Ur. His team celebrated the find until the photographer developing images of the seals noticed something impossible. The impressions in the photos showed different symbols than those physically present on the stones. When confronted, the local dig workers refused to touch them, whispering about seals that rewrite themselves. Woolley dismissed their fears until his field notes began appearing in cuneiform he couldn't read, his fountain pen inexplicably carving wedge-shaped marks. The seals were later stored separately after a museum curator cataloging them developed tremors in his dominant hand, the same affliction promised by their inscriptions. Decades later, the seal's malice proved just as adaptable. In 1989, a collector displayed a cylinder seal in his London study, bragging it bore a royal lineage. Within weeks, his prized garden withered not from drought, but from a blight that left leaves curled and brown, mirroring the seal's fallen leaves curse. When experts examined it, they discovered something chilling. The seal's original owner was a Mesopotamian official executed for embezzlement, his final act being to curse those who would hold what I held. Modern technology hasn't tamed these curses, it's amplified them. In 2017, a lab scanning a seal with a supposedly harmless inscription watched their 3D printer replicate it flawlessly, except for one detail. Every duplicate reversed the godly symbols into demonic figures not present on the original. The researcher overseeing the project later admitted hearing whispers in dead dialects whenever handling the scans, though audio analysis picked up only silence. Another team in 2021 used AI to translate a seal's worn markings, only for the program to generate threats in modern English targeting, those who digitize the divine. What makes cylinder seals uniquely terrifying isn't just their curses, it's their intimacy. Unlike towering ziggurats or stone steels, these were objects meant to be held, rolled between fingers that now, millennia later, still seem to remember their original purpose. Archaeologists who have mishandled them report waking with clay residue under their nails despite gloves and meticulous cleaning. Museum visitors lean too close to displays and later find their own documents mysteriously stamped with faint, unfamiliar symbols. The seals don't just warn, they imprint, and after 4,000 years their message remains clear. Some signatures were never meant to be forged. The story of the Great Flood wasn't just a Mesopotamian myth, it was a divine warning carved into clay, a prophecy wrapped in curses meant to outlast civilizations. When George Smith, a British museum assistant, first deciphered the flood tablet from Nineveh in 1872, the world marveled at its parallels to the biblical Noah. But few noticed the ominous lines at the tablet's edges. He who reveals the flood's secrets without reverence shall know its waters anew. Smith laughed it off until his hands began cracking with eczema so severe, colleagues joked it looked like cuneiform etching itself into his skin. Then came the nightmares. Night after night, he drowned in his sleep, waking gasping for air, his sheets soaked with an inexplicable dampness. Coincidence? Maybe, but when Smith died suddenly at 36 while searching for more flood tablets in the desert, even skeptics wondered if the curse had claimed its first modern victim. The flood tablets didn't just describe catastrophe, they seemed to conjure it. In 1961, a team excavating at Sippar, the city associated with the flood hero Atrahasis, unearthed a fragment mentioning the tears of the gods. That night, a freak downpour flooded their dig site, washing away tools and notes. Locals nodded knowingly, whispering that Enlil, the god who'd originally sent the deluge, still guarded his secrets. Decades later, in 2014, a digital restoration project on the same fragment suffered a bizarre setback. Their servers flooded when a nearby pipe burst, though engineers confirmed no fault in the building's plumbing. The water damage curiously spared only one file, an enhanced image of the tablet's curse, now glowing unnaturally bright on every screen. What chills researchers most is how these curses mimic the flood's themes. A linguist working on a flood tablet in the 1980s developed a rare condition causing her to sweat uncontrollably, her doctors baffled by tests showing no physiological cause. A collector who displayed a fragment in his home saw his basement flood repeatedly each time, the water halting precisely at the tablet's display case. Even distant interactions trigger eerie parallels. When a podcast host mocked the flood curses in a 2020 episode, his studio's fire sprinklers discharged without warning, drenching his equipment mid-broadcast. The kicker, meteorologists confirmed zero rain in the area that day, but the most unsettling case lies in the tablet's silent influence over those who study them. Academics analyzing flood myths report unexplained bouts of thirst, dreams of tidal waves, and in at least 3 documented cases, an uncanny ability to predict rainfall days in advance. One professor who dedicated his career to comparing global flood narratives drowned in 6 inches of bathwater, his autopsy showing lungs filled with fluid matching the mineral composition of the Tigris River. His final journal entry read, "The water remembers. The Mesopotamians didn't just record the flood, they weaponized its memory. These tablets weren't meant to be read casually, They were sacred contracts with the gods, bound by curses that seep through time like rising groundwater. Handle them without reverence, and you might just learn why the ancients feared the rain. After all, some stories don't just describe disasters, they carry them. And the flood's warning remains as sharp today as it was 4,000 years ago. Tread lightly or you'll drown in the past. The Temple of Enlil wasn't just a place of worship, it was a fortress of divine authority, guarded by curses as unrelenting as the god himself. As Mesopotamia's supreme deity, Enlil didn't issue idle threats. His temple inscriptions promised calamity with chilling precision. Whoever desecrates this holy ground, may his breath turn to fire in his lungs, may his children wither like drought-stricken crops, and may the heavens themselves reject his pleas. These weren't poetic flourishes, they were cosmic contracts signed in cuneiform and enforced by a god who shaped destinies. When archaeologists first breached the temple's ruins in the early 1900s, the curses proved alarmingly literal. A German team led by Dr. Friedrich Delitzsch reported tools snapping mid-excavation, their fractures suspiciously clean, as if sliced by an unseen blade. Workers swore the ground trembled beneath their feet when they approached the inner sanctum. Those seismographs registered nothing. Then came the sickness. 3 team members developed identical symptoms, searing chest pain and coughing fits that left their handkerchiefs flecked with blood. Local physicians diagnosed desert lung, but Bedouin guides whispered of Enlil's fire breath curse. The expedition's photographer captured an eerie anomaly, a shadowy figure looming in the temple doorway despite no one being present. The plate shattered before it could be developed. Decades later, modern archaeologists fared no better. In 1978, an Iraqi team using ground-penetrating radar near the temple's foundation recorded sudden temperature spikes, readings jumping from 80 degrees to over 120 in seconds, as if the stones themselves were burning from within. The project's lead engineer, a rationalist who mocked the legends, collapsed hours later with third-degree burns on his palms, though he'd touched nothing hotter than his clipboard. When questioned, he could only rasp a single phrase, "The wind, it wasn't wind." Enlil, after all, was the god of storms. The most unsettling pattern lies in the curse's generational reach. A French archaeologist who smuggled a temple brick to Paris in 1922 saw his granddaughter born with a rare respiratory condition, her lungs scarred in patterns resembling cuneiform script. A museum curator handling Enlil artifacts in 2008 developed a sudden allergy to incense, the very offering meant to appease the god. Even digital interactions trigger eerie parallels. When a research team scanned temple inscriptions in 2015, their cloud storage suffered a bizarre corruption. Every file related to the project spontaneously combusted in the system, leaving only ashen pixels where data should be. Tech specialists found no malware, just a cryptic error message in the metadata. The Lord of the Storm has spoken. What makes Enlil's temple unique is the specificity of its vengeance. Unlike random misfortune, the punishments mirror the god's domain. A hydrologist studying the temple's drainage system in 1991 drowned in a flash flood on a day when weather reports predicted zero rain. A contractor who used temple stones to build a villa saw his roof torn off by a freak gust, the debris landing in perfect cuneiform-like formations. Even attempts at preservation backfire. When conservators applied a protective resin to one inscription in 2020, the chemical inexplicably boiled away, leaving the clay untouched but the lab's fire alarms blaring. The Mesopotamians didn't fear Enlil because he was cruel, they feared him because he was consistent. His temple wasn't just sacred ground, it was a courtroom where divine justice never adjourned. Modern hands may brush the dust from these stones, but Enlil's verdicts remain in session. After 4,000 years, his curses don't just linger, they've perfected their aim. And as the afflicted have learned too late, when the god of wind and fire speaks, you don't argue, you pray. Among the pantheon of Mesopotamian demons, none were feared more than Lamashtu, the child-stealing, womb-withering embodiment of nightmares. Unlike ordinary spirits, Lamashtu didn't just haunt the shadows. She actively hunted, her grotesque form part lioness, part donkey, part bird of prey, crafted for maximum terror. Families didn't merely whisper her name, they buried protective amulets beneath their doorways, each one inscribed with curses designed to turn her hunger elsewhere. But here's the chilling twist: those same amulets meant to repel her often carried their own dark side effects for modern discoverers. Take the case of Dr. Miriam Khalid, who in 2011 unearthed a Lamashtu amulet near the ruins of Kish. The artifact, small enough to fit in her palm, depicted the demoness clutching two serpents, her mouth gaping to reveal rows of needle-like teeth. Khalid documented the find meticulously until her notes began including passages she didn't remember writing, all describing a woman with talons standing at the foot of her cot. Then the dreams started. Night after night, she'd wake gasping, the sound of infant cries ringing in her ears despite living alone. The final straw came when her morning coffee tasted inexplicably of copper, her bathroom mirror fogging with breath-shaped fingerprints when no one else was home. The amulet now resides in a Baghdad museum, but its malice seems indifferent to distance. Night guards report motion sensors triggering near its display case at precisely 3:33 a.m., the Mesopotamian hour of the demon. One janitor quit after finding the glass smeared with a thick, dark fluid that evaporated before it could be tested. Most unsettling, the amulet's original inscription, once translated, revealed it wasn't just a protective charm. It was a diversion, a desperate mother's attempt to redirect Lamashtu's attention toward a rival family. The curse, it seems, still honors its original purpose. Then there's the infamous Berlin collection incident. In 2019, conservators noticed something impossible about their Lamashtu figurine. Its cracked clay surface was slowly healing. Microscopic analysis showed the fissures narrowing by fractions of a millimeter each month, as if the artifact were regenerating. Stranger still, staff who handled it reported phantom sensations of being watched from behind, their necks prickling as if brushed by matted fur. The museum's climate log showed unexplained humidity spikes around the figurine, the air thick with the scent of myrrh and rotting meat. But perhaps the most disturbing pattern ties directly to Lamashtu's ancient specialty, reproductive terror. Female archaeologists handling these artifacts report disproportionate rates of menstrual irregularities, miscarriages, or fertility issues, ailments eerily mirroring the demoness's mythical victims. A survey of 12 researchers who worked with Lamashtu objects revealed 8 experienced unexplained gynecological events within 6 months of contact. Coincidence, maybe, but when one linguist translating a Lamashtu incantation suddenly lactate despite never being pregnant, even skeptics hesitate. The terrible genius of these curses lies in their cruel irony. The very objects crafted to ward off a demoness became vessels for her lingering malice. Modern science scoffs at ancient superstitions, yet the evidence whispers otherwise. After all, how many coincidences does it take before they stop being coincidental? Lamashtu's legend warned she'd never stop hunting, and 4,000 years later, her prey might just be those who thought her story was over. To the Mesopotamians, statues weren't just art, they were vessels for the gods themselves. Carved from precious stone and adorned with lapis lazuli and gold, these divine images were believed to house the actual essence of deities, making them objects of worship and of terrifying curses. Inscriptions on temple statues warned in no uncertain terms, "Whoever scratches my eyes, may the sun god Shamash blind him. Whoever breaks my nose, may his breath cease. Whoever moves me from my place, may his home become a ruin." These weren't metaphors, they were binding contracts with the divine, and modern archaeologists have learned the hard way that these curses didn't expire with the fall of Babylon. Take the case of the Nippur lion, a massive stone statue unearthed in 1889. The moment workers lifted it from its ceremonial pedestal, a sandstorm of unnatural intensity engulfed the site, lasting precisely 7 hours, the same number as the statue's inscribed curses. The expedition's artist, tasked with sketching the lion, developed a tremor in his drawing hand that faded only after he abandoned the project. Decades later, when the statue was loaned to a museum in Chicago, security cameras captured an inexplicable phenomenon. The lion's stone eyes would occasionally reflect light like living tissue, though no external light source could explain it. Conservationists who analyzed the statue's surface found microscopic traces of a now unknown resin, likely the divine breath mixture priests used to animate sacred statues. Then there's the infamous Ishtar of Arbela incident. In 1934, a team excavating near modern-day Erbil discovered a headless statue of the war goddess, its base inscribed with a warning: "She who has no face shall take the faces of those who mock her." The lead archaeologist, a staunch rationalist, joked that Ishtar could borrow his head anytime. 3 days later, he awoke to find his reflection blurred in every mirror, as if his features had been smudged from reality. Photographs of him developed normally, but anyone who looked at him directly claimed his face appeared unfinished, like a poorly rendered sculpture. The condition lasted 7 months, the exact duration of the Assyrian lunar cycle, tied to Ishtar's wrath in cuneiform texts. Modern museums have become reluctant curators of these animated artifacts. The Louvre's Mesopotamian wing has a particularly notorious statue of the god Adad, which staff refer to as the Stormbringer. Since its installation in 1952, the gallery has experienced 17 unexplained leaks, always during clear weather, always directly above the statue. Security logs from 2018 record an even stranger event. The statue's stone beard dripped water for 48 consecutive hours, coinciding with catastrophic floods along the Tigris River, thousands of miles away. When analyzed, the liquid matched the mineral composition of ancient Mesopotamian rainwater. Perhaps most unsettling are the accounts from artifact conservators, those who handle these statues closest. One working on a statue of Enki, god of wisdom, reported her tools moving slightly when her back was turned, as if adjusting their own restoration. Another, cleaning a statue of Gula, goddess of healing, found her chronic migraines miraculously cured, only to develop them again the moment the statue was placed in storage. And in 2021, a thermal scan of a Marduk statue revealed an anomaly. Its core registered 3 degrees warmer than the surrounding stone, pulsing faintly in a rhythm resembling a heartbeat. The Mesopotamians didn't just carve statues, they built homes for gods who never truly left. And if the curses, the phenomena, and the inexplicable misfortunes surrounding these artifacts tell us anything, it's this: some doors between worlds were never meant to be opened. The divine may sleep, but it doesn't forget. And when modern hands disturb these sacred vessels, they're not just breaking ancient taboos, they're awakening forces that never agreed to retire. Among the most feared artifacts of Mesopotamia were the necromantic texts, clay tablets inscribed with rituals for summoning and binding the dead. These weren't mere ghost stories, they were instruction manuals for breaching the veil between worlds, each one layered with curses to deter the unworthy. A typical warning etched into such tablets read: "Whoever recites these words without purification shall become a bridge for the dead, his flesh a gate, his voice their vessel." The Mesopotamians didn't just fear the dead, they respected their power, and these texts were the ultimate forbidden knowledge, booby-trapped with spiritual consequences that still unsettle scholars today. In 1938, British archaeologist Reginald Campbell stumbled upon a cache of these texts beneath the ruins of a Babylonian House of Whispers, a temple where necromancers once practiced. His team celebrated the discovery until the translations began. One linguist reported his reflection blinking out of existence in mirrors after handling the tablets. Another claimed his shadow moved independently at dusk, once gesturing toward the Euphrates in a way that matched a funerary rite described in the texts. The final straw came when Campbell awoke to find wet footprints leading from the dig site to his tent. Though the desert sand showed no traces, the tablets were hastily shipped to the British Museum, where they remain sealed in a climate-controlled vault labeled Ritual Hazards. Modern researchers haven't fared much better. In 2014, a historian at the University of Chicago digitized a fragment of a necromantic text, only for her computer to generate a corrupted file filled with whispers in dead dialects. Audio analysts isolated 7 distinct voices, all reciting the same phrase, "You open the door, now feed us." The scholar abandoned the project after developing night terrors so vivid, she awoke with clay dust in her bed, a substance matching the tablet's composition but absent from her home. Then there's the infamous Berlin incident. In 1989, a team at the Vorderasiatisches Museum attempted to reconstruct a broken necromantic tablet using UV light. The fragment's curse explicitly forbade reassembling what the gods have sundered, but the team dismissed it as superstition. During the experiment, the UV lamp shattered, plunging the lab into darkness. When lights returned, the tablet lay whole again, though no adhesive had been applied. Security footage showed the pieces levitating and clicking together, frame by frame. The restored tablet now sits in a lead-lined case, its surface inexplicably warm to the touch. Museum staff report hearing knocks from inside the display after midnight, always in groups of 3, the Mesopotamian death signal. What makes these texts uniquely terrifying isn't just their curses, it's their precision. Unlike generic threats, they mirror the rituals they describe. A translator working on a summoning incantation in 2017 began sleepwalking to cemeteries, his pajamas stained with grave dirt. A collector who displayed a necromantic tablet in his library found his books rearranged nightly into funeral mound shapes. Even technology falters. Servers hosting digital scans of these texts frequently crash, displaying error messages in cuneiform-like code. The Mesopotamians didn't write these texts to be studied. They wrote them to be feared. Their curses weren't metaphors, they were safeguards, ensuring only those willing to pay the price would dare speak the dead's names. And if the whispers, the footprints, and the unexplained cold spots surrounding these artifacts are any indication, the gate between worlds wasn't just a legend. It was a warning, one that modern hands keep testing, much to their regret. Some doors once opened can't be closed, and the dead, it seems, are still listening. The libraries of Mesopotamia weren't just repositories of knowledge. They were vaults of divine secrets guarded by curses as potent as the gods themselves. In cities like Nineveh and Ashur, where clay tablets piled high with everything from medical remedies to celestial omens, librarians didn't just catalog texts, they etched dire warnings into the very shelves. May the god Nabu, keeper of wisdom, strike blind the eyes of thieves. May their hands wither like dead reeds, and may their tongues cleave to their jaws if they speak these sacred words. Unbidden, these weren't mere threats. They were spiritual contracts designed to outlast empires and punish anyone reckless enough to plunder what the ancients considered gifts from the gods. When Austin Henry Layard first uncovered the library of Ashurbanipal in the 1840s, his team marveled at its vast collection until the translations began. Workers reported an unsettling phenomenon. Tablets referencing curses would inexplicably crumble when handled, while those containing medical incantations remained pristine. One translator, copying a text on demonology, developed temporary blindness coincidentally, the same affliction described in the library's protective curse against those who read without reverence. Even more chilling, Layard's personal journals reveal entries written in a cramped, frantic script he didn't recognize, all describing a figure with a scribe's stylus for fingers, watching from the excavation shadows. Centuries later, modern archaeologists continue to face the library's wrath. In 1991, a team restoring fire-damaged tablets from Nineveh's collection noticed something impossible. The charred fragments emitted faint smoke whenever exposed to moonlight, as if still burning from some ancient, unseen flame. When infrared scans revealed hidden text beneath the damage, the words matched a curse from the god Nisaba. Let the knowledge of thieves burn eternally within them. The lead researcher abandoned the project after waking to find his arms covered in blisters matching cuneiform symbols, though he'd slept nowhere near fire. Perhaps the most infamous case involves the Ghost Catalogue of Berlin's Vorderasiatisches Museum. In 2015, curators digitizing Ashurbanipal's library fragments discovered corrupted files containing lists of texts that didn't exist in their collection, titles like The Blood Rituals of Error and How to Silence a Screaming Soul. IT specialists found no hacking, just additions, as if something were cataloging itself. Then came the physical manifestations. A night guard patrolling the tablet storage reported seeing a tall, thin figure sorting the air where no shelves stood, its fingers leaving wet clay smears on surfaces that dried before they could be sampled. The Mesopotamians didn't just protect their libraries from thieves, they weaponized knowledge itself. These curses weren't about punishment, they were about balance. To scribes who spent lifetimes copying sacred texts, wisdom wasn't free for the taking. It demanded respect, ritual, and sometimes blood. Modern researchers might dismiss these warnings as superstition, but the blistered hands, the phantom librarians, and the self-writing catalogs suggest otherwise. The guardians of these libraries didn't vanish with Babylon, they simply adapted, and they're still enforcing the rules one trespasser at a time. Some gods refused to fade into obscurity quietly. Across Mesopotamia's forgotten temples, those dedicated to deities whose names even historians struggle to recall, there's a pattern of eerie defiance. These aren't the grand ziggurats of Marduk or the lavish shrines of Ishtar. These are the ruins of gods abandoned by time, yet their curses cling like desert dust, punishing those who disturb their silence with misfortunes too precise to dismiss as coincidence. Take the temple of Nergal, god of plagues and the underworld, in the once great city of Cuthah. When archaeologists uncovered its ruins in the 1950s, they dismissed local warnings about a shadow that drinks breath. Days later, the team fell ill with identical symptoms: fevered sweats and blackened gums, their tongues swelling until speech became impossible. Medical tests showed no known pathogen, but a translator working on the site's inscriptions made a chilling connection. The temple's threshold bore a curse promising the silence of the grave to trespassers. The sickness lifted only after the team reburied a ceremonial dagger they'd removed, exactly where the curse specified it belonged. Then there's the case of the Weeping Temple near Lhasa, dedicated to the obscure goddess Namta, a deity of fate and disease. In 2009, a drone survey revealed walls slick with an unknown fluid, not groundwater, but a viscous, saline substance matching nothing in the region's geology. Workers who collected samples developed weeping sores on their hands, the pain vanishing only when they poured the liquid back onto the temple stones. The site's lone decipherable inscription, "Her tears salt the wounds of the arrogant," but perhaps the most unsettling encounters involve gods so forgotten their names are lost entirely. In 2017, a team excavating a ruined shrine near Eridu uncovered an altar covered in crude carvings of eyeless faces. The moment they lifted it, their equipment failed, not just batteries dying, but compasses spinning wildly as if north no longer existed. That night, several researchers dreamed of a figure whispering a name that tasted of rotten honey, a name they instinctively knew was the deity's true title, one never recorded in any text. When they spoke it aloud the next morning, a sandstorm engulfed the site, lasting precisely 7 minutes, the same number of faces on the altar. The team reburied the artifact, but one member later claimed the name still echoed in his dreams, each repetition followed by a week of inexplicable bad luck. These neglected gods share one terrifying trait: Their curses don't just punish, they remind. A deity like Nergal might strike down thieves with plague, but a forgotten god ensures you never forget their wrath. A curator at the Istanbul Archaeology Museum learned this the hard way after displaying an unidentified votive statue. Visitors reported hearing their names whispered in empty galleries, while night guards caught fleeting glimpses of a figure, kneeling as if praying to something just beyond the edge of sight. The statue was eventually sealed in storage, not because anyone understood its origin, but because the staff unanimously refused to work near it. What chills modern scholars most isn't the violence of these curses, but their loneliness. A worshipped god's wrath feels transactional, break a rule, face consequences. But the vengeance of abandoned deities feels different, almost desperate, as if each misfortune is a scream across millennia, "You will remember me." And if the trembling hands of archaeologists, the inexplicable illnesses, and the nightmares that follow them are any indication, these gods may finally be getting their wish. From the silent wrath of forgotten gods to the surgical precision of royal decrees carved in stone, the curses of Mesopotamia don't just linger, they hunt. Consider the evidence. The excavator struck blind after mocking a statue's warning, the researcher drowning in 6 inches of water after translating flood myths, the clay tablets that crumble only when their curses are read aloud. These aren't scattered misfortunes, they're patterns, echoing the exact punishments inscribed millennia ago. Coincidence? The sheer specificity chills the bone. Why would a modern scholar develop third-degree burns matching a storm god's vengeance, or a thief's skin welt with cuneiform after stealing a boundary stone? Science offers explanations: psychosomatic suggestion, toxic molds, even mass hysteria. But when a drone captures phantom hands rising from the ruins of Etemenanke, or a museum's lights fail as a curse is recited, rationality strains at the seams. Perhaps the truth lies between worlds. The Mesopotamians didn't see curses as magic, they were spiritual laws, as real to them as gravity. Their beliefs shaped reality through ritual, psychology, and something modern archaeology can't quite quantify. When a king warned that thieves would wander hungry in the wasteland, was he invoking divine justice or planting a psychological landmine so potent it detonates across centuries? Either way, the result is the same: artifacts that refuse to be mere objects and warnings that refuse to be silenced. So where does that leave us, holding broken seals that still cut, standing before statues that still watch, translating words that still bind? Maybe these curses are echoes of a time when the divine felt closer, when words held the weight of creation. Or maybe, just maybe, the gods of Mesopotamia never left. They simply wait, coiled in clay and stone, for the arrogant to test their patience. What do you think? Have these archaeologists stumbled upon supernatural forces, or is there a darker, more human explanation? Share your theories below, and if you dare to keep unraveling history's most dangerous mysteries, hit subscribe. The past isn't done with us yet.